July 23rd, still past 6 p.m. Thank you all for being here. May I ask if you reviewed the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
That's excellent. Very efficient. Thank you. May I take a vote on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. I'd like to go right to item 24, if we could, please. Mr. Anderson, Governor's Traffic Safety Committee for the Highway Safety Program. The Executive's Office?
It should be.
I believe that came from the DA office.
I don't know if I'm on the way.
Okay. Let's go to 25, please. We'll come back to 24. 25.
County attorney's on this.
Okay. Ms. Condon, hi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the Law Committee. This is the county's annual request to renew the county's liability insurance coverage as well as the malpractice coverage. This is the insurance coverage that provides general liability, automobile, police professional, your boiler and machinery, your property insurance coverage for all of your operations, as well as the malpractice coverage for the nursing home, the health department, the mental health, children, youth, and families, the various social workers around the county. The insurance broker took this to a full market last year. This year was a renewal of the current coverages because, for the most part, the premiums remained consistent. Some premiums are less than they were last year, some premiums are more than they were last year, so we are about the same as we were last year. The only addition is the 3-year pollution coverage for the water purification district, which was up for a new 3-year policy, which is expiring now, so it's a new 3-year policy with the same carrier. They looked at other carriers. Navigators is the carrier. They came in with the best coverage. It's about $14,000 for 3 years, higher than it was the last time. There are apparently, not for us, we've never filed a claim with this carrier, but apparently there are numerous claims that carriers provide this type of insurance coverage. It covers seepage into pollutants, so it covers seepage into the air, seepage into water systems. Apparently there are a number of claims for seepage into the rivers, Hudson River in particular, which carriers of this type have been covering. So the broker was hesitant to go to other carriers. We would have seen larger premiums. This carrier, our carrier, because we've never filed a claim, we didn't see a very high increase in premium. So they're recommending we stay with them. Based upon the above, I would recommend that we renew all of the terms of the coverage are the same as we have currently.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Condon?
Yes. If I'm looking at the correct information, the last page of the handout here shows what the current premium is, what the new premium will be. It's about $84,000 more.
Yeah, what I believe is missing from this, they did not include because they didn't market it, is crime. Crime is a 3-year policy. We pay 3 years, so $45.08 is not included in this, but it was included in my spreadsheet. That's the crime. It's a 3-year crime policy.
Okay.
Take that off. The rest of it goes for the pollution.
Thank you.
Mr. Berger?
A couple of questions. Our coverages at the jail and the nursing home, which of these components do they fit into?
Okay, so the jail is covered by the package policy, the excess package. So it would depend upon what we were sued for. If we were sued for a slip and fall, it's still under the package, but it's a general liability. If we were sued for a police professional, it was alleged that there was a jail beating and assault case, that would be under the police professional, but it's still under the package. The excess package, which is the first large one right up at the top of your memo, That is the
Okay,
package.
excess.
That's subject to a $1 million SIR,
Self-insured
right?
retaining,
So
okay.
that is the package, which is, that package is the 1 million SIR, and it's for liability, police professional, and auto.
Has the self-insured retention gone up on any of these as,
No, we've had $1 million,
so that everything is apples to apples?
everything is
compared
apples to apples.
last
We've
year?
been at $1 million self-insured retention probably since 2005,
Is that,
actually since 2003.
is that package the only one that has a self-insured retention?
No, the,
Med-Mal doesn't have any?
no, Med-Mal is first dollar coverage. And Med-Mal, Melnick provides first dollar coverage for the nursing home and slips and fall within the nursing home. So if there's a slip and fall outside of the nursing home grounds, that would be the package. If there's a slip and fall within the nursing home on the floors, that's Melnick. And it's first dollar coverage. They provide counsel. We do not provide counsel for them. So, you know, the lawsuits that we get sued on at the jail, the county attorney's office defends. Somebody slips and falls in the nursing home, or there's a malpractice claim in the nursing home, or a resident falls. Melnick defends that. They assign counsel under their policy. We are not involved unless to the extent of we assist with defense, as, you know, the client. They provide first dollar coverage. We've been with Melnick since 1986. So they've just continued under a claims-made policy.
Okay, I have one last question. I realize that Arthur Gallagher is the broker of record. How long have they been the broker of record?
2013, we RFP for that.
You did?
Yes, we've RFP every 4 years for that.
Every 4 years, so 13 and 17, they were then renewed, or
No, we did an RFP.
you did a separate RFP?
Yeah, we've done separate RFPs. Every 4 years, we've done RFPs.
Okay.
Mr. Mayo, did you have a question?
Just a quick one. Hi, Eugene.
Hi.
Just my understanding is that the excess insurance wouldn't kick in until we hit the $10 million limit on the...
No, so the excess kicks, that's the umbrella. So, all right, so the excess kicks in, we have $1 million self-insured retention, and then the excess kicks in, and then we have the umbrella on top of that.
Okay, who has the umbrella?
The umbrella is the policy. So, it's the next one, the Allied World. I probably should call it something different. So it's excess commercial, and then the next one that's called excess, I should probably call it umbrella. I just call it excess. So the first one is the excess package. And then the next set, where it says policy limit, there's a second policy limit.
Yes.
So we actually have $20 million in total coverage over the $1 million SIR.
But wouldn't it be, just from working in court, wouldn't it be better to have the initial carrier and the excess be the same insurance company?
They won't write it. They don't write it. They're two separate policies. They don't, it's too big of a risk. They separate the risk out. They won't write that. Yeah, they won't do it that way.
I know from working in court,
Yeah.
they won't settle
They won't
until
do-
they put up the $10 million.
Yeah, and they won't do it that way, so it's a separate carrier. So, yeah, that excess, they're actually, it's like an umbrella over, I should probably call it umbrella.
Okay.
I just called it excess, but they're two separate policies. But it's so large of a risk, they won't write it for us, because the county is, not because we are a bad risk because of our liability, but because of our holdings within the county. From an underwriting perspective, you know, they base it upon your population, you know, your size of your budget. They look at your claims. We are, you know, the size of our risk. One carrier won't write that large of a risk. Your buildings.
Is there a motion? Wow, all at once. Moved by Ms. Cunningham, seconded by Mrs. Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. by Karen Ziegler to the table for items 26, 27, and 28.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
Start with 26.
Please, thank you. This is, I'm trying to figure out which of the three grants this is. Just DCJS.
Very small.
The three grants, this is a renewal of our Division of Criminal Justice Services grant. We're very excited about this. This is something that we got a few years ago, and this replaces the old Department of Health funding that we had probably in the 2006 through 2010. This really covers an umbrella of services. This is our direct service, this is our prevention education, these are the criminal justice services, this is hotline services. So this really covers the bulk of what we do. So we're very excited to have another year of funding.
Any questions on item 26?
Motion.
Motion, thank you, Mr. Higgins. Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 27.
Thanks. This is funding, again, it's federal funding that's channeled through the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And we're very excited. When this initially came out, that we were not eligible for because they weren't allowing government agencies to request it. And that we lobbied very strongly because we deserve, those of us who are government agencies who provide these rape crisis services, to be able to advocate for funding for ourselves. We dedicate, it's a small pot of money, it's around $10,000 this year, and it's really to serve those folks who are immigrants and refugees. We have a large population in Albany, and those folks who have been crime victims in their country of origin during their refugee status, and who may be victims of crime now. So this really funds our interpretation services, and it funds our clinical services and court advocacy services.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Passes unanimously. Item 28.
Thank you. This is our largest grant. This is Office of Victim Services. We've been funded by Office of Victim Services since the 70s. They fund everything except prevention education. So this is our largest grant for the bulk of our funding. So this is a 3-year grant with a possible 2-year extension. And again, we have been funded almost from the very beginning by Office of Victim Services, and I do foresee us this continued funding in the foreseeable future. We have a separate Office of Victim Services grant, which is our case management grant, that kind of runs parallel to this. So this allows us to do, as I said, everything but our prevention education. So this is our hotline, it's our therapy, it's our core advocacy, it's our community engagement and outreach. So this really allows us to do the bulk of our work.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kraft and Ms. Cunningham.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So the $2+ million is
Yes.
over a 3-year period?
Yes, it is.
And it's an 80-20
Yes, it is.
split between, okay.
Federal and state, yes.
Has that always been the case?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Ziegler.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Mr. Kraft, could you move the mic from under your paper? That's okay. They have trouble enough hearing me as it is. All right.
Not here yet.
Okay. Turning to item 1.
So this is local law G for 2018. Mr. Cal is in discussions with Ms. Cunningham, and Joe and I want to speak for you, but Ms. Cunningham is going to take this over. Mr. Cal is going to withdraw as the sponsor. We need something in writing to that effect, but for now, I'd recommend it be tabled pending that occurring.
I agree.
Motion? This can just be, this will just be tabled. All right.
Very good. Number 1 is tabled. Mr. Fine, I don't believe is here. So number 2 is tabled. Items 3 to 8 all concern rule changes.
Table, please.
9 and 10 are also Mr. Fine's. Table those as well. Item 11, It was also Mr. Kale's.
And Ms. McLean has been designated as the sponsor. This Mr. Cal has withdrawn. It'll be tabled since Ms. McLean couldn't make it tonight. Thank you, Ms. McLean.
And item 12.
Same thing with 12.
Yeah.
And
He's right here.
Good evening. I'm back here with item 13. Local Law F, amending Local Law 8 for 2011 as subsequently amended to implement an anti-nepotism policy. We met a month ago here, and there were some suggestions made by both council, I believe by Mr. Feeney, by Mrs. Cunningham, other people. No one came back to us with any other feedback. We wanted the month to get some feedback, but we did put those changes in, and I brought that amended version to you. And Arnis, has that been passed out?
Yep.
I'd like to just review that with the committee if I could. Does everybody have that?
Yep.
Okay. So you'll notice that the Ethics Commission has been stricken from paragraph B, or, well, section B, paragraph I. So this will no longer, and II, no longer will include the Ethics Commission. Anecdotally, the supervisory official or the department perhaps, whomever it is, would present a request to the Personnel Committee, which would identify whatever the concern might be, be it a relationship, a conflict of interest, something like that, along with any other items that demonstrate the candidate's qualifications. From there, it goes to personnel. Personnel will review it. Similar to other types of appointments, the candidate shall appear in front of the Personnel Committee and can be questioned. The Personnel Committee may, in fact, question the department about other possible candidates if, in fact, they believe there may have been other more qualified, or perhaps just out of curiosity about the other candidates. The Personnel Committee can then, at their discretion, refer, if they wish, the appointment to the whole legislature with a vote. Long roll call, simple majority. The most, one of the most important, I think, helpful amendments to this, if you look under section 2, is that this law will no longer be subject to referendum, so that's been removed. So I was hoping if there were any other questions, we could address them tonight.
Thank you. I like the changes. I just have a question. So under the language that that talks about sort of the process if a candidate, so say my daughter, so she's a recent engineering student, sees a job at the, within the county, applies for the job, but she's precluded from moving forward with that.
If in fact it's a job that is under this category, yes.
If it's, right, if
Right.
it fits under this category. So, so in order for her, maybe she has a specific engineering expertise and she's an attractive candidate for that purpose or that reason. So her candidacy would then be brought to, the department head would say, oh gee, you're related to somebody who works for the county, who's a legislator. And the department head would say, but I really want to hire you because I think you're the best candidate for this job. So at that point, the department head would go to, in coordination with the county exec, would submit some sort of request to the personnel committee of the legislature, who would then evaluate her credentials and make a determination whether that's how this is supposed to work.
That's right.
Okay.
And I think you bring up, your words actually give me an opportunity just to highlight again that these are only the positions in Appendix A, which is somewhere in the backup, but it's policy-making, high-ranking jobs, and probably wouldn't even apply to somebody right out of engineering school. This is really for influential positions and policymaking.
Okay, but if it was a director level?
Yes,
or
yes, perhaps it would be, right.
So
It's about 60 positions, I think, total out of the almost 4,000 that we have.
Just to clarify, that it's not in the backup, your reference is to local law 8 for 2011, that's what you're referring to, it's not in this
Oh, it's not in here, okay. But there is an appendix, yes, that was supplied at one point in this somewhat lengthy process.
It's in the ethics code. It wasn't
It's in the ethics
supplied
code,
with this
yes.
law, there was
Yeah.
no backup of that supplied for this, just to clarify.
So my question is, what is meant by the language that is any appearances of impropriety, blah, 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 and/or?
I think, you know,
What's meant by that?
to be candid, it's just a way of saying, look, if it's coming into question as a nepotism type hire, that's your basis. I think it's meant to give people a little bit of latitude rather than narrowly define what that might be.
So impropriety is referencing the nepotism relationship?
Correct.
So is there a better way to say that? Because the word impropriety sort of implies that, you know, there's something bad about the person or the relationship.
I think it's meant to imply impropriety in the hiring, not the person, but maybe we could take suggestions as to a wording.
Okay, thank you.
How will job candidates be identified as falling under this policy?
This is their department head or whomever they're hiring, whomever is hiring them would be responsible for bringing this to light and presenting it to the personnel committee. So the onus falls on the hiring agency within the county.
And that's in Appendix A where we can see, is that what?
Are you talking about the list?
If I could, Appendix A is attached to the ethics law, and basically it's a list of individuals who have to fill out the ethics form.
Okay.
So if you're the individual who, you know, works on a tractor, you're not filling out ethics law. If you're a legislator, you're filling out the ethics law. So it's already a list that's been created and been used for years and years and years to determine who's got to fill out the form.
And that's the
Is that filled out before they're hired?
Is what get filled out?
Is the form?
Well, that pertains to the ethics form, so that's just a list of individuals who, if you, again, in the example that was provided, if Legislator Cunningham's daughter was applying for a job as the county attorney, that individual would definitely fall into this, and you would go through the personnel committee and go through the process. So the ethics form itself would not get filled out until an individual is hired on the normal basis associated with that.
And conversely, if a young engineer were to apply for a position in I don't know, is water purification department included under this? I just use that because they have engineers.
I think so.
But if there was something in classified service for an engineering position, it wouldn't even be covered by
Right, it
it.
would be covered in there.
Because it would.
But if it's the director level,
Right,
are they?
right.
Right, I
Yeah.
just don't know.
It basically, in my estimation, it's discretionary hires. It's the, you know,
Leadership level.
Yeah.
Not statutory.
yeah.
Mr. Brown?
Why, in conjunction with the county executive, why not the head of the human resources, or, I mean, he's been the biggest.
The county executive is
He's been the biggest
ultimately-
advocate of nepotism in the whole county.
The county executive is in fact their boss ultimately, right? They don't work for the, you know, so, I mean, I think that's, it is the responsibility of the executive branch of government to vet their hires, but the supervisory official, of course, is the one who would bring it to the table, theoretically. But that's the law that we're seeking to create, is that they actually be aware and disclose what they're doing.
I'd like
Because it's
to
their
make a
boss.
motion to move this out of committee.
And I'll second
How
that.
would you, well, what type of motion? With recommendation, without recommendation? With a favorable recommendation?
And I'll second that.
Before anyone does that, just if I may, Mrs. Cunningham did ask that we look at this language of impropriety. I don't think that would be considered a substantial change if we clarified that language, would it? Just so we don't get into a trick box here.
Well, there's no trick. I mean, we need to know what the language is before I can make a
Yeah,
determination.
I think she was just concerned about the wording of,
Can I make a suggestion?
And to answer your question, the idea, you have to make a motion to amend the specific language you want here in this committee, then you move out the amended language. There's not a,
well, then can we take some suggestions now so we don't have
Can I-
concerns?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Maybe say nepotism.
We seem to have general consensus here. If you and Todd were to agree upon a word, you could have a joint amendment on the floor to put
Well, I
that
have a
word in.
suggestion now, actually, Arnes mentioned, why not simply say any appearances of nepotism, rather than
Yeah, that's
impropriety?
fine.
I mean,
I'm
it's
comfortable
more
with that.
direct.
There we go.
Yeah,
If everyone would be happy with such an amendment in the language,
yeah.
that would be section B, paragraph I, and the appearances of nepotism.
so Mr. Drake, the proposal is in subsection I, change of impropriety to of appearances of nepotism?
No, it says any appearances of impropriety. You'd be simply striking impropriety and inserting the word nepotism,
There's 2 instances of it.
keeping the comma and moving on from there.
I have a question of council based upon your concern. If we make a motion to report this out with a favorable recommendation instead of with no recommendation, and the favorable recommendation fails, are we then able to make a motion to report it out without recommendation? Or do we only get one bite at this apple?
Yes, you can make a motion to move it out without recommendation after, if the favorable were to fail, if that occurs.
Okay, just so.
But before we take a vote on that, if
need
it's
to
going
amend.
to be amended, we should make a
Have a
motion to
motion.
amend it, second and amend it if that's what.
Do you want me?
I'll make a motion to amend it with the suggested change that
I'll second
Todd
it.
with council recommended.
And I'll second it.
So you need a,
There are 2 instances of impropriety.
sure. So that's something that needs to be clarified. Mr. Drake, you're saying that, and we just need to clarify before we go forward on this amendment, the nepotism is changing to impropriety. There's another impropriety on the second to last line.
Yes, you are correct. We should change both. I feel that's appropriate.
So just to be clear, the amendment is to change, and replace impropriety with nepotism in both of those positions.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so, Ms. Cunningham, can you just make a motion to,
I would like to make a motion in section 2, or B1, in the, I guess there's only one sentence in that section, to replace the word impropriety in 2 places in that sentence for the word nepotism.
now you need a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So now I would like to make a motion to report the amended version with favorable recommendation.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So it's 15.
So I would then like to make a motion to report it out without recommendation.
Second it.
Thank you, Mr. McBroom. All in favor? Unanimously, without recommendation.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
And thanks for catching the second one.
Item 14, Mr. Drake?
Todd? You have Ward 14. Oh, I forgot about that. Forgive me. That's term limits, right? Yeah, we're gonna table that for this time. Sorry, that's why I wasn't even prepared to talk about it, my mistake. Do I have anything else before I leave?
I think I'm...
Okay, thank you.
I understand.
Item 15 is tabled.
I understand what you're saying, but they've been saying all.
Item C, sorry, 16.
No, I'm fine.
Very good. 17, Ms. Cunningham. Table pending public hearings. The bank law.
Yeah, table. Oh, can I just mention one thing on this? The bag fee, I just wanted folks to know that I am working on some language change in here that I've been working with one of the big grocery store chain individuals, so I'm working on some changes that would, in two sections. One would actually create sort of a model consumer education program that Albany County would launch when this is passed, and the purpose of that would be to bring together stakeholders like the retail establishments as well as consumer groups and also individuals representing laggard populations that we think may not quickly adapt to a bag ban fee, possibly, senior citizens, maybe other groups that might take a little more training. And the purpose of that consumer education would be to try to get us ready for the state plastic bag ban, which, notwithstanding whether this is passed or not, is going into effect in March of 2020. So there's going to be some language added to kind of outline a consumer education program that the county would launch and pursue, and again, working with stakeholder groups. And then the other section that I think came up in a prior law committee discussion was I would like to add some language about the 2 cents and what the Controller's Office of Albany County will do with the 2 cents and institute some reporting back to the legislature about what the 2 cents has gone for. So a little bit of accountability and transparency. So please look for those. And I assume we're going to hear about those 2 issues tomorrow night, potentially.
When do you anticipate having that language? Or are you going to wait till after the hearing?
Yeah, I'm going to wait till after tomorrow and then noodle around with some stuff.
Well, let me ask you a question. Does that, when you change it after the public hearing?
I assume we might need another public hearing.
Okay, that was sort of my question. Do you anticipate that the controller will have complete discretion to allocate how this money is spent? Or will that be a county legislative decision, or don't we know?
We are tabling this, so.
Yeah, we're tabling it, but I...
Well, no, I mean, I just want to, it's a legit question.
The 2 cents goes to the controller's office. I'm looking at Chris, because I know you worked on that.
I think it's similar to what we did with the casino bill, where there's this generic information about how the money has to be used. So, for example, that was for property tax relief. Right, that's how the casino, whether that actually occurs is similar. But I think it's the same thing. It's for like bag, bag relief efforts or whatever. It's this broad-based term that the legislature gets to further define.
So the legislature gets to define. The controller is the collection agent, and the legislature will make the policy determination. Good, well, that's really what I was looking at.
Somebody's got to kind of run the program, the legislature's.
Well, I understand that, but it's not the new controller who's going to say, aha, I have $4 million and I'm going to spend it like this.
No, that would be the purpose of the language that I would want to draft.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Item 18, Mr. Peters. Correct, so we'll table item 18. Mr. Muriello, item 19.
Well, good evening, everyone. After some input and feedback from the committee the last time I was here, made changes to Resolution 222 and sent this out in an email to everyone in the committee, so you had the opportunity to look at this before this evening and ask any questions that you may have. You'll notice that we took out the language about the fiscal impact statement, and that's been put into a separate resolution. Also, we added really an opt-out here that the requirements of this resolution may be waived when the majority leader and the minority leader together agree that circumstances exist which warrant such action. So therefore, I've taken the comments from the committee, reworked this a bit, made the amendments, And so I'm just here this evening to see if there's any additional comments or concerns that anyone has. I think everyone understands the intent of this resolution is to make sure that we have legislation before standing committees, before it's voted on, to go to a public hearing. And we have it here 48 hours before that vote is taken. So any comments, concerns?
Yeah, just one comment for the committee, and I've spoken to Minority Council about this. My comment last month, and I know Mr. Moriello has put in this language about the Majority Leader, Minority Leader able to decide and agree that circumstances call for this not being met. What I was suggesting actually is another part of this that actually says, this applies except in circumstances as required by, as necessitated by law. One great example, and I brought it up last time, was the mortgage recording tax. We were really under the gun last year, right around the fall, we were waiting on the state, working with state council to negotiate the correct language, and didn't have that negotiated till, honestly, the night of the committee meeting. And had we not done that, had we not passed it that night, which would have been less than 48 hours, we would have lost the ability to collect a mortgage recording tax. So I would strongly recommend that there be something put in here, in addition to what you have here for the majority and minority leader, to specify that, this doesn't apply in circumstances where legal expediencies would require us to act without 48 hours notice of an amendment. I'd like to leave that window open so you always, as a group, give yourself wiggle room in those rare but recurrent instances where it's needed.
Perhaps you and Mr. Morial get together and set language.
Well, could I address that? I mean, currently, the rules of legislature don't allow for that either. The only rule that does allow is, and it's already in here, is Rule 11, and Rule 11 is covered in this. It says specifically that if you have legislation that's coming under Rule 11, that, it's an emergency, we need to get it done, mortgage tax, anything comes in as a Rule 11, and that's clearly stated here on top of page 2.
I guess,
As an exception.
my only caveat to that would be Rule 11 typically comes into play in the main legislative meeting. We don't typically invoke it in a committee, and so you'd want to have the ability to not have something held up in committee. We wouldn't want it held up in committee, and if it was held up in committee, it would never get to the Rule 11 portion, I guess is my concern. If something were to be held up in a committee, there are other avenues you could go that we don't use in this body, but the Rule 11 would be not necessarily available if it's been held up in committee.
I've never seen that.
So I have a question. So what problem is this trying to solve?
Well, what's happened in the past is that we've had legislation come before us that we would send to a public hearing, and we really don't have the final version of that legislation that's going to that public hearing before us. So we're really voting on something that we don't know what we're voting on. So we should have this in front of us. It's for transparency purposes, and the public should be able to see it as well. So therefore, we should have whatever we're voting on available to not only us, but the public 48 hours before.
I thought we have requirements already about when something has to be made available to the public.
So the agendas are made available 24 hours, minimum, or excuse me, they have to be there at least 24 hours before the committee meetings under our current rules. That's the requirement now.
So when I made changes to redistricting, I remember there were certain timeframes that I had to get them to you in order.
For the agendas going out.
Right. So we already have this, but you're not comfortable with the 24, is that?
Well, no, I mean, how many times have we voted on sending items to resolutions or local laws to a public hearing when we didn't have the final version of that local law that was going to be presented at the public hearing? It's happened a number of times. So this is to prevent that from happening. We need to have that final version of that local law present 48 hours before a committee meeting, before we take a vote to send it to a public hearing.
Can I ask?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mr. Morial, would you estimate that those instances have been 80% of the time, 10% of the time?
That I don't know, but it's become more frequent. That's why we've done this, it's becoming more frequent.
I mean,
Example, recent example, Frank?
Sure. It would be redistricting. Reapportionment was one. And also, local law E, I believe it was sick leave. In fact, the sponsor, I think, was told that he had to have that version going to the public hearing submitted and released by a certain period of time. It was after the committee meeting. And I still remember that person submitted that and released it at the 11th hour. So we shouldn't be waiting until the 11th hour. I think we need to have this information before our standing committees 48 hours in advance, so we can see what the final language is going to be and we can make an educated vote.
About the public hearing. It really
Yes,
is the
about
public hearing
Right,
that
but
you have
we want
issued.
that language for that legislation here, so we can actually vote on what is going to the public hearing. Not just saying, well, it's only going to a public hearing, but we'll see it when it gets there.
I'll wait till next vote.
I think in the committee is really the only time we have to debate the merits of something. It's the only time that we get to talk back and forth, and we get to talk about specific provisions that are there or not there. And any time you send something to the floor without knowing at least what, regardless of the vote, what it is, and there is a legal requirement that you have to make a publication date for public transparency, but as members here, I think we have a right to know what we're voting on to go to the floor, because things can change dramatically. And while it may be not a lot of times, and you're building in some safeguards so that we're not stopping things that are time critical, I know as a member of a committee, I would like to have all the information in front of me before I make a decision.
is there a sense of whether this is a problem with the rules as currently written, or a problem with enforcement application of the rules?
I would imagine it's really a problem with the rules that's currently written. That's why we're doing this, because we want to tighten this up to make sure that we have this information before us 48 hours before we take this vote. I mean, why would we not want to have this information before us? I mean, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't want to be informed and have the public informed of what we're voting on 48 hours before we take that vote.
Yeah, I guess I would say the two examples that you used are both bills where we had seen multiple versions and had many, many conversations about. So they weren't, and in the case of redistricting, that was, I mean, I remember that discussion, and I think it was the third public hearing. So there were some things we were modifying that were going to make the deadline that was the current rules that we had to meet. But it wasn't going to the floor for a vote. It was going to a public hearing where people were going to weigh in on the changes and so forth. And it wasn't a new local law. It was language that had been reviewed and talked about and reviewed and talked about and changed and talked about. And it was a public hearing. So I mean, I understand the point if we were going to be voting on the actual, proposal, but these were public hearing discussions, and we were going to stop reporting out a public hearing resolution because of, the language being not in that more comfortable window. I do think that's a little different, and I think it's a little different when we've been laboring over legislative changes and noodling over different concepts and ideas, yet the inherent structure of the local law was the same. I think we need to be mindful that the legislative process is an iterative process, and when you have, that was our third public hearing on the reapportionment proposal, and yeah, we did make the deadline for our current rules, and people got to see them, and the public showed up or didn't show up to opine about those, and we had ample time to digest those before the actual vote on the proposal. So I think, I don't think this is,
Well, we knew there were changes coming. We didn't know what those changes were. So I still feel it would have been better if we had that final version before, so we could have seen what those changes were, so we knew what we were voting on. I think it's our responsibility to know exactly what we are voting for or against. And without having that language before us, we can't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Frank, if I understand you correctly, for example, there's a public hearing tomorrow night, okay? And let's say that back at our previous meeting, a month ago, we voted out the public hearing based upon the draft that we had. Then tonight, we come to this meeting, and you or anyone else says, hey, I reviewed this, there's got to be a change in this paragraph, and I want to make the change. Well, obviously, the public hearing's tomorrow night. So if we make that change, you're saying the public hearing now has to happen a month later?
Well, again, this is something that the majority leader or minority leader can discuss, and if there are circumstances that warrant
Well, I mean, it's just a public, it's not earth-shattering here, it's just a case of timing, that from the time we first approved it till now, folks have gotten together and they said, we really need to change this, so here we are. And is it necessary to now wait another month before we have the public hearing because we didn't get the information within 48 hours?
We voted this out last month, correct, to go to a public hearing?
Right.
So therefore, the language has already been released and it's there.
Right. So you're saying it can't be changed?
I would, unless the majority leader or minority leader get together to do that, no, it cannot be changed. But also, don't forget, we get input from the public at these public hearings.
Absolutely.
So things can change based on what comes out of that public
They
hearing.
often do.
So therefore, this isn't something, a person isn't locked into this language. Based on the public hearing and what we hear, I'm sure there very well could be changes. I just want to make sure that when we vote on something and send it to a public hearing, we have the final draft, so we know what we're voting on and we're sending to that public hearing.
Mr. Mayor?
I've never seen it happen, but can Rule 11 be invoked at a committee meeting? Because I think Kevin's right, if it can't be, say the minority leader is on a worldwide cruise and gone for 2 months, you could really be stuck.
Well, also,
Sorry, to answer that question, our rules don't contemplate Rule 11 being used in a committee context. That is used particularly for an item not on the main legislative agenda. It doesn't, as far as I'm aware, it's never been contemplated for a committee meeting.
So there should be some kind of safeguard.
Well, yeah,
just in case one or the other isn't here. The minority leader, the majority leader, if they can't get together, and you have an emergency.
No, that's why you have deputies.
But it doesn't say.
Mr. Morial, how did the language come to be that it's majority, minority leader?
We were looking for really an escape clause here in case there were some circumstances in which we had to waive this. I thought that it would be good to have, if the two of us were to get together, the majority leader, minority leader, we could take care of any circumstance that were to arise that we didn't anticipate.
Another thought might be
Designated representative.
By a vote of a committee. Like, for instance, we couldn't have moved Mr. Drake's nepotism bill forward because we had a change in it. So that would have been stalled for another month, unless there was some means to get
Well, I think
that.
at the meeting, I don't think that changes anything. If there's some minor language that needs to be changed at the committee meeting. I mean, the final version has been presented to the committee, and then at the committee meeting, if there's some minor revision that has to take place, I don't see where that's an issue. You can't amend that and then send it out for a public hearing. Be the same as what you did with Mr. Drake.
Waiver is too long. Last couple comments, and then let's...
Just a quick question for Mr. Mayo's, to Mr. Mayo's question, if it said when the majority leader and minority leader or their deputies, would that...
I would say
Or
his order.
designate.
Or their deputies.
How about designate in case it doesn't?
Or
Designate.
designate? Kevin, is that... So if it's majority, minority leader or their designee?
I mean, that's a potential amendment you could make to it.
That's fine with me.
Any motions?
I'll make a motion that we amend the language to include the majority, minority leader, or their designee.
Any
Second that
seconds?
motion.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the amendment passes. Do I have a motion on the floor? On the resolution as amended. Mr. Meany?
Move it without recommendation.
Without recommendation, seconded by Mr. Touche. All in favor of moving without recommendation?
Aye.
I'm in the negative.
And opposed?
Pass it out.
So it passes as amended,
Okay, thank you.
even without the 48-hour notice. So if we're amending at the committee meeting, and everybody writes it down, we're okay. We don't need the 48 hours, is that what you're saying?
I think if the committee is seeing the actual words, that's the operative goal, is
So
that...
at the public hearing, we're tomorrow night, we all approved it. We still need 48 hours for the public hearing, not 24.
We have a public hearing tomorrow night. Joanne has said she's going to make amendments as well. So before,
If it's a substantive change, you can't do it that way.
and it may need another public hearing, we would see the amendments before you set a new public hearing, right? I think that's what it...
The standard of it, still has to be a substantive modification. So that standard still remains. And again, if this committee had set something for a public hearing for tomorrow night, and then let's say this evening you did make substantive modifications, then clearly it becomes a choice. Do you hold the public hearing on old language just to see what the public has to say, or do you cancel it and reschedule with a new language? But you still have to have substance.
Okay, so you can't do that. You've
I
already
can't.
closed the
I
vote.
did not
You've already
mean to.
closed the vote on
Okay,
it.
forget it then.
Yeah. Okay, so that passed 7 to 1.
20, we're tabling, public hearing tomorrow night.
Gentlemen, 21, it's the item pricing.
This public hearing.
Tabling pending public hearing?
No, we're passing that out.
Pass that out for public hearing.
Public hearing in August.
So you need a motion.
Can I just ask you a question?
Second, all in favor?
Yeah.
What exactly is item pricing? Because Tim Nichols had this bill like 10 years ago. Is this still a thing?
So basically, under the state law doesn't require you to, the state law has unit pricing requirements where you have that little tag on the front of a shelf which
Yep.
says $3.99 per pound or something
Yeah.
like that. They don't require you to go through and individually tag each item on the shelf. So what happened back in 2009 is this legislature passed, like many county legislatures, passed an item pricing requirement which requires you to either tag each item individually, or you can get a waiver if you pay the waiver fee and have the necessary equipment, which are scanners,
Zappers.
depending on the size of your store, you need a certain number of scanners. The fee was a $3,000 flat fee regardless of the size of the store. What the Majority Leader's amendment to that law proposes is that you carve out a new category for small convenience stores who would normally not pay any fee, would just choose to individually item price everything. This creates a new category for stores under 5,000 square feet, which would allow them to pay a $750 waiver fee rather than the $3,000 fee, which is exorbitant and not able to be absorbed by those smaller organizations. It creates that category and also allows them to not have to have the scanners, but rather a machine at the front desk that's able of doing what we're asking for.
Got it, thanks.
You need a
You made a
motion?
motion, I need a second. Thank you. Thank you, Shay. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 22.
Is that me? Okay.
That's you, yes.
And just want to make it clear, I'm not looking to have this moved out this evening. I really want to start the discussion on having financial impact statements submitted with any local laws or any legislation that has a budgetary implication of more than $5,000 annually. I mean, we have passed laws where we have not had a financial impact statement submitted with it. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for input from this committee, from other legislators, and one of the things I think we need to do is I think we need to update the fiscal impact statement. So when I emailed this out to everyone, emailed the current version of our legislative financial impact statement. What I'd like to do is possibly ask councils from the chair's office, the majority office, the minority office, maybe to get together. They can massage the language a little bit and work on this financial impact statement. So next month, I can come back and present something that I think would be acceptable to everyone. But if there's anyone that has any input now that they'd like to give us on what I emailed last week, I'm here to take that feedback.
So I just have a question.
Sure.
So is our problem that we do have a requirement for a fiscal impact statement on things that we
Yes,
local
that
laws,
have an impact.
And we ignore it?
Yes,
So that's the problem?
yes.
So this says, no, we really mean it, and we really should
Exactly.
have.
We have to have it, absolutely.
So,
Well, why wouldn't we anyway?
well, I understand that, but doesn't that doesn't really solve the problem. If the problem is we ignore it, why wouldn't we just ignore the really mean it iteration? I mean, does this solve our problem?
I would hope it would solve our problem. I mean, I'm bringing this to our attention because we do have a problem. And we can't keep ignoring, our rules. And I'm hoping there's some teeth in this where, we can resolve this issue. And that's why if we have councils from the three offices get together and discuss this, hopefully we can come up with some type of language that will make this more concrete.
So it sounds like you're tabling it for now, but inviting further discussion.
Absolutely, and I do want further discussion. I think this is something that's important, and I think we all need to have input, and I welcome input from everyone.
All right, next.
So,
One sentence, Mr. Berger? You're done, I know.
Put to bed here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll pass that.
Thank you.
I'll give my comments to Frank.
Sorry. Item 23, nominating.
I have amendments that Kevin's passing out now. I emailed these amendments to everyone last week. I did make one more change. We changed the definition of people in here. It was used a couple places. We changed it to tobacco retailers. But basically, it's going to be table pending public hearing. If anybody has any questions on it.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you, sir.
Where is the public hearing resolution? Is that in the,
Paul, do you want to answer that, or?
If you want.
Yeah, so it'll be introduced in the individual exchange, which this month is August 1st. So that public hearing won't actually go out to a committee until the August committees.
So just for timing purposes, that would come to the law committee at the end of August, it would be presumably voted out, and then we would pass it in September.
The public hearing would be in September. The public hearing would be in September.
No.
You'd have a vote on it in October.
No.
Yes.
Public, if we had the resolution is in the exchange, then we're gonna refer it to committee in August, we'd vote on it in August.
You vote
For a September public hearing.
public hearing.
Vote, oh, it would be at the end of September would be the public hearing.
Correct. Yep.
And then we would have to vote the local law out at the end of October,
It would-
depending on when the public hearing is, or have a post-public.
It's hard to say how it'll play
Depending on
out,
what
but
the
yes,
calendar.
October is when you're looking at
Yep.
maybe a vote on, depending on where the law
Okay,
is.
I'm just
What's
trying to
the
check
change?
for timing purposes. Okay, I was wondering where it was.
Other questions?
10B.
I will take my comment from the last item and make it germane to this one. Paul, you have a public fiscal impact notice. I know that the Commissioner of Health talked about what the cost would be to implement this law. Okay. What is the cost of lost sales tax revenue to the county? Because that's the big numbers. That's the huge numbers. Because, look, let me just give you for instance, if you are a menthol cigarette smoker, and once a week you go and you buy a carton of cigarettes and you fill up your gas tank, you're gonna spend $140 for a carton of cigarettes. Imagine that, $10 for a pack of cigarettes and $4 in tax, and you're gonna spend 20 gallons of gas times $3 a gallon is $60. So you got $200, and all of a sudden you're not going to make that purchase in Albany County. So you're gonna go to Saratoga County, you're gonna go someplace else, and we're gonna lose the sales tax revenue from one person, one trip, somewhere between $8 and $10. One person, one trip. I know the county controller has been trying to work up numbers. He seems to think this is going to cost a fortune. Would you please consider updating your fiscal impact notice to talk about the reduce of sales tax revenues? Because this will affect hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of locations.
If we can get that information, Mr. Burdoff. I've tried to get that from the controller's office before, and they told me there's no way of getting that. But I'll ask again. Same thing, with the savings of healthcare costs. I mean, there will be, if we reduce smoking, there's going to be some savings in healthcare costs at some point.
Yeah, but this is revenue lost to the county. This is actual.
Paul, how would you figure
We have
that
some
out?
comments at this end of the table.
You can't.
How would you figure it out?
How would you figure it out? There are reports on cigarette sales. There are assumptions as to how many people will not be able to buy those. I mean,
Pretty speculative,
Huh.
seriously. I mean, it is.
Well,
That, you're talking about someone's gonna cross the county line to go buy their stuff elsewhere.
Well,
Which is gonna
because
happen.
you can't buy it here
I
anymore.
You
understand,
don't.
but,
They don't even split the sales tax up in that way, is what I've sold before, but I'll check with the controller and find out.
Well, there may
Somebody
also be
changed
some,
it.
I appreciate it, but that's an example of information that a committee should have prior to making a final determination, and that was my
If it's
my
available,
point
but,
before.
my understanding is it's not available, but I'll go on again and ask.
Camille, you might not be able to have this information as well, but any idea from the health department, the cost of smoking-related disease treatment in Albany County,
Sure.
and what that might cost going forward, and any reduction in those expenses?
Okay.
Great.
So is Mr. tabling this?
Motion adjourned?
table.
A motion to table?
We got to address 24 here.
Yes.
So 23 is tabled,
23 is table.
and 24 is going to have to be tabled as well.
Okay. 24 is table as well.
Motion adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins.
Go put that kid on it.